Hey there, sports psych enthusiasts. I'm Dr. Colin Fehr, and I want to share my passion with you. I love talking about ways to unleash the power of the mind. This recording is part of a larger lecture series I've created in an effort to make sports psychology concepts more accessible to a larger audience. The information contained in this series is especially well suited for students of sports psychology and is presented in a way that makes for easy listening for all. Welcome to Sports Psych Concepts.
Hey there, fellow sports psych enthusiasts. Here we are in another Sports Psych Concepts lecture recording. Thanks for joining me. I want to discuss some interventions, some common interventions that are used in the applied sports psych space. And I won't go over every single one. There's a long list, and I've found in my own experience working with athletes that a lot of interventions are actually custom ones that you kind of come up with in the moment working with your clients that are tailored to what their needs are. So there's no real cookie cutter approach here when we're talking about interventions, but I'm going to try and give you some broad categories of interventions that you can pull from that represent some of the classics. So certainly not exhaustive, but I think in the realm of, well, I guess I'll just tell you, things like self-talk and confidence, self-regulation, all of those, we would consider those vital for achieving and, of course, sustaining optimal performance. So those are the key areas that I'll talk about in this presentation. Just know that there's more than that out there. So before I jump into those, I want to emphasize I want to paint the broader picture here for you as our backdrop, and that's just looking at what the characteristics of optimal performance are. And if we look in the world of sport and performance, because it certainly extends to domains beyond that, but there's certain characteristics that seem to be present that are pivotal factors for achieving and maintaining success. And so I that's what I want to establish as our backdrop here. So when athletes are, physically, technically, tactically, they're all pretty equal on those sorts of things. The mental game is the tiebreaker. That's what makes the difference. Now, the interesting thing about this is that just like physical skills, those technical things, those have to be developed. They're not innate traits. The same holds true for mental skills. There are competencies that can be taught, they can be practiced, and they can be developed just like physical skills. So this is a really important thing to understand. Think about them like they're muscles. We can train them, and these are the types of overarching characteristics that we should keep in mind when we're talking about interventions. It's just this is pretty typical of the approach that we're going to take in this space, is that, hey, we can work on these things, we can develop these things, because these are the difference when it comes to achieving optimal performance. So now let's get into some of the specifics. I mentioned self-talk as one, and this is just, there's always this internal dialogue going in athletes' heads, right? And the things that they're telling themselves, and there's just these silent or not so silent conversations. There's certain athletic examples. You take tennis players, for examples, often talk to themselves. You hear their self-talk. You're not guessing what that is, and that can happen before they're performing. It can happen during. It can happen after. There's this internal dialogue going on with any athlete, and so it can be a number of different things that they're telling themselves, right? Athletes they'll instruct themselves regarding their technique. Maybe it could be more motivational, trying to boost their effort. It could be try to increase their confidence, just having expressions or affirmations or things that they're saying. So it can be intentional, but it also is, most of the time, in many athletes who don't have the training in this, they haven't worked on it, they don't have the self-talk skill. It's just automatic thoughts. It's just things that are there. And so sometimes it might fall into these categories of it's instructional or it's motivational, but many times it can just be this inner critique of what it is that they're doing. They have a, to frame it differently, they have a critic inside them in their mind all the time. And so when we're looking at self-talk interventions, our goal here is first to help the athlete recognize their self-talk and then be able to identify when it is hurtful or when it is helpful. And when it is hurtful or unhelpful, we want to help them replace it with constructive alternatives. So we can design interventions. Typically you'll have them track their self-talk first, self-talk log, or you can do that in session with them. Well, here's a particular scenario. What is it that you normally say to yourself? Because that dialogue tends to be repetitive. Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you suck at this. You'll never get this. Or don't screw it up. Or whatever the instance might be. So we identify those things, track those things, and then we work on building specific cue words or scripts, self-talk scripts that then they use in those high pressure situations. So it's you want it to be customized, it's unique to the individual, and they are essentially coming up with a plan. It's a scripted response. When you find yourself in this situation, what are you going to say to yourself? What do you need to hear in that moment? We've identified what you normally say. Now, what do you actually want to say? And then they plan that, and then they practice that in session. And then once they're faced with that situation, then they already know what to say. They have a response to it. So then it's not just this automatic scripting that comes in that maybe they've developed over the years through their upbringing or coaches' voices in their heads or teammates or whoever it is that might be influential. Now they have this planned response for when they're in those situations. So that's a way to think about self-talk interventions, is you're coming up with these scripts or these keywords, affirmations, things that they can pull from when they're faced with those situations that maybe normally they have unhelpful dialogue happening. So now let's talk about building confidence. And I said at the beginning, there's so many things we could talk about, but I think self-talk is you get a quick return on investment when you talk about that, and same with building confidence, and then some of the self-regulation I'll talk about. And so that's why I chose these ones for this presentation. Perhaps I'll do more presentations with others later. But so confidence, you think about this, some people describe it differently. It's like, I feel unstoppable, I feel bulletproof, I feel powerful, strong. They have this inner belief in themselves to achieve what their goals are, whatever it is. But it allows the athletes to perform almost automatically and where it feels easy. But confidence can be fragile. Anybody listening to this, I'm sure, knows that. And it also can be context specific. So we can be confident in one particular area, but not so confident in another area, or it even can be very skill specific. So let me give you all those different layers of examples. So let's take a tennis player who is generally confident as a tennis player, but maybe not as a math student. Okay, so they're confident in the tennis context, but not in the academic context, at least within math. But then you can break it down even further than that and say, well, maybe they're more confident on their backhand ground stroke shot on the court than they are in their forehand back, or their forehand ground stroke, right? Or vice versa, however you want to put that, forehand or backhand. They're more confident in one than they are the other, and so it can be very context specific like that. So and it also can go up and down depending on how we're performing and what's going on and other factors, the things that we're telling ourselves, what is our self-talk. And so this is the sort of foundational idea. When we're working on confidence, we're trying to build it. Our interventions should focus on building a resilient sense of confidence by targeting its primary sources. So we need to know where it comes from. Where do they get confidence from? And if they only get it from a small number of places, or just like, well, I only am confident when I'm performing well, then we can help them broaden the number of ways that they can get confidence. Okay, so that's a key thing here. So there, I guess with that, I guess I'll transition and talk about like, well, what are some of those primary sources? So past performance accomplishments, that's a classic one, but we can use performance profiling, identifying different strengths and seeing where they are. We can set goals based on those things. Okay, so some other sources of confidence, it might be vicarious experiences. So they see this aligns with self-efficacy theory for those who are familiar with that, but seeing others who are in a similar situation, similar level of competition and all of that. They just see similarities in the other athlete, and they're seeing them succeed. Hey, they can do it. You ought to be able to do it. That can give them confidence. It can be verbal persuasion. So as a mental performance consultant or a coach, you can work with them on those things. And part of that can be self-persuasion. Okay, this is a really important thing. Is how can you persuade yourself that you want to be confident and that you can be confident in this situation, instead of what is more automatic for most athletes is to tell them all the reasons not to be confident and why they're not confident. Okay, and so you can build some specific targeted interventions around this. I mentioned performance profiling, but self-talk is a big one here. Self-talk, or having them, you could use imagery for this as well. So they play their own individual highlight reel in their mind. Maybe they actually have video of it, but they go to a particular workout or they go to a particular competition, a practice training session where they were really performing well, they were performing at their best, and they replay that in their mind and they reconnect with those feelings and the types of things they were telling themselves. And that can be a way that they can build confidence. Okay, but also just looking for the small wins, because those athletes tend to overlook those. So like if they didn't get the overall outcome, the win, then they don't see the other things along the way. And so we can help them do that to where they see these small increments of improvement, these things where they're moving in the direction where they can build some confidence on those things. And like I said, it's not that the outcome doesn't matter. Performance accomplishments certainly matter for them, and that's going to be their greatest source of confidence. But when that isn't readily available or isn't coming, or they're going through a slump, then we need to try and bolster them with these other sources of confidence. Okay, so now let's talk about how to enhance self-regulation. And this is just maybe I should have started with this. It's an overarching idea here because that's really what we're going for. Is self-regulation could apply to self-talk. It could apply to emotional regulation. It could apply to confidence and motivation. It really is. It's what part of the reason why I'm mentioning it here, because it's pretty broad, and that's something that we're going for. It's an essential competency, and to define it for you, we could say it's the ability to control and manage one's own actions as they're working toward achieving their goals, right? So that's a key mental performance skill. Is can you control, well, first have an awareness of, control and manage your actions, your behaviors. You're just regulating yourself. And so interventions in self-regulation focus on teaching athletes a cyclical process, or at least this is one way to think about it. And so you can look at different phases. So, for example, you could have the forethought phase, then you have the performance phase and the self-reflection phase. So the forethought phase is where they're really just kind of planning and setting goals, and you maybe you could have, even before this, you can have the awareness phase. One way you could bring this in, but okay, they're planning, they're setting goals, what it is that they're wanting to accomplish, they're identifying those things, and then they move to the performance phase where they're actually monitoring their actions. So they're paying attention to what they're doing and seeing how that aligns with what they said their goals were and what their plan was. And then you can make adjustments from that. And then it concludes with the self-reflection phase. So where they evaluate what worked, what didn't work on this, and then you work through that process again. And it really can be empowering for athletes to become more independent and disciplined in this self-regulation process. So they're not relying on external voices, their parents or their coaches, to in their minds at least, act upon them, tell them what to do. They don't have to think about it. Just tell me where to go. I'll do this. I don't have to regulate. I just respond to whatever I'm told to do. But we want them to be more autonomous in this. That is our goal here. And so by building their awareness of what they're doing, helping them plan, set some goals around this, and just regulating themselves and who they are, as a performer, but also just in life. It's kind of a life skills idea as well. And then tracking that can be a powerful tool for many athletes who need help with this. Okay, and as any of you who have listened to me before know, I'm a fan of integrated interventions, just weaving things together and not compartmentalizing too much, because it's all connected. And most of the most effective interventions usually are gonna have a combination of things. They're not just focused on a single skill. So like motivation and confidence are going to be tied together as different attributes there, and so we can use different tools instead of just focusing on on one. But also, like I was saying before, is a self-regulation and self-talk and confidence. There's a lot of overlap there, and so that's what we want to do with our interventions. Is we want them to be multifaceted. They're tailored to the individual athlete. And so I could give you an example here and say, well, let's say we have a soccer player. All right, here's the case study of a soccer player who is usually a scorer, but's kind of been in a slump, hasn't been able to score any goals, hasn't been in as many positions, maybe has had a few shots on goals, and so their self-talk might be something like, "Oh man, I'm so unlucky. I'm maybe I can't do this anymore." Their confidence could be low, likely it would be, and they may lack some sort of structured approach to their training. Okay, so an effective integration or integrated intervention is what we would need to address all of these. Okay, so if we have an athlete, they're saying they're unlucky, right? We can say, well, let's replace the word unlucky with a process-oriented cue, something that's going to focus on like self-talk that's going to help them. So see the net, focus on your follow through or execution. See it as what you want to have happen. Hear the ball hit the net. Just different things that they can tell themselves that focuses on what it is they want. Okay, so it really could be, you could have it be a process oriented cue, so they're engaging in the process itself, but it also could be some effect of the outcome. Okay, so that's why I'm saying you hear the ball hit the net, and or hear the ball come off your foot cleanly as you kick it toward the net. So different things like that, telling themselves to repeat those things, like kind of like a mantra or some sort of trope in their mind. And then if we want to address their confidence, you could have the athlete review videos of past successful goals to boost their belief in their ability. You could do some imagery of them seeing those things. I talked about the highlight reel earlier as an overall example. And then if it's self-regulation for them, we can help them create some sort of structured pre-shot routine. If these are like penalty type kicks, corner kicks, those sorts of things, if they find themselves in that situation. It could be some sort of post-game reflection plan to analyze their performance rather than just the results, so they could do some journaling and that sort of thing. So it's the key thing is that we want this to be integrated, because that's going to ensure that we're not just treating a single symptom, but we're building a robust set of mental skills and teaching them how to manage those things. Okay, this is what's going on with your self-talk and your confidence. Maybe your motivation is over here. You're starting to experience some anxiety. How can we work on self-regulation and just managing yourself and what it is that you're doing, so you have a plan and a way to go about these things, and we're building some specific skills and self-talk and building confidence. So hopefully that helps illustrate the idea for you a little bit better on this example. All right, and so to wrap things up, I just want to reiterate that, remember, mental skills, they're not just this innate thing. They can be trained. Our role as practitioners is to design effective interventions that help our athletes build their mental muscles. Okay, and so when we use holistic, sort of integrative and process-oriented approaches. That's what empowers athletes to develop their own internal resources and essentially become their own best mental skills coaches, which is what we're aiming for. We want to get to the point to where we're obsolete. And so we're helping them understand these tools and use these tools so then they can do the work on their own. And that's the big thing, like I said, with self-regulation. It's like that's the overall goal, is get them to the point to where they can do that, and they end up coming in as as needed thing. Maybe they hit a barrier and all of that. But anyways, thank you for listening to this presentation. Hope you found it helpful. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this recording in the Sports Psych Lecture Series. I hope you learned something. More importantly, I hope you learned something that you can apply in your life. Feel free to share this presentation with others who might be interested. And if you're interested in more content like this, visit the Fehr Advantage channel on YouTube, or find the Fehr Advantage podcast on Spotify, or visit my website at fehradvantage.com.